For TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jesse Budtender, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. Medical cannabis, despite being legal to buy, still exists in the world of alternative medicine. For medical patients, the reality is they'll have to go to a dispensary to get their medication. And that presents a number of problems for everybody. Patients being forced to share private information with a budtender who probably doesn't have medical experience and possibly wasn't even trained to provide anything beyond a fun time. Naturally, all that guesswork leads to some less than stellar experiences. But all of that will just be a tale we tell our grandkids if this next business gets their way. Today, I'm talking to Elisabeth Mack, CEO and founder of Holistic Caring. Elisabeth has 33 years of experience in medicine, and her new company aims to train alternative medicine specialists like acupuncturists, massage therapists, and yes, even budtenders to become cannabis health coaches. Her business in a box, as she describes it, outfits potential coaches with the skills and resources they need to provide quality medical cannabis recommendations to patients. Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jesse. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you say on your website that you have 33 years of medical experience. What I just found out right before we started recording is that that medical experience actually begins at the age of 14, which is incredible. Tell me a little bit, how did you get started in the industry?
Well, if we go back to 14, Jesse, I was a candy striper all through high school at Hinsdale Hospital in Illinois.
For people that don't know, so a candy striper is, from what I understand, like a volunteer that helps
Correct.
out. What kind of things were you doing at the age of 14?
Well, that's a funny story. The starting point, I believe, was the gift shop. So processing transactions, literally helping people check out and then getting flowers from the gift shop up to the patient rooms. And then it progressed to transporting patients. Back then, they didn't really have orderlies paid for that. So the candy stripers literally would help transport patients. And then, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was working in the ER. So it was quite an experience as a volunteer. But I knew I was bit by the healthcare bug for sure. Worked for a couple of physicians at a medical practice during college, and then graduated from Elmhurst College with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. So that was 1987, and then I spent my first 10 years in hospitals in Chicago, San Francisco, and San Diego. Came out to California as a traveling nurse in June of 1990. In 1996, I completed my MBA in healthcare administration. Always see things kind of from the bigger picture and like to build systems and run things a little bit more efficiently and effectively. So I ended up spending the next 20 years in insurance carriers, working in clinical and then general operations, and then migrating over to sales. And my last real job was as the regional sales manager for Anthem Blue Cross for the County of San Diego Employee Benefits. And what happened was I crashed my bicycle. Went out on leave to have some surgery, and I was at a chiropractic visit. And she said, "Why don't you have my medical massage person work out your shoulder?" And that therapist was using CBD in the oil. And immediately I said, "Hey, this smells funny. What is this?" And she said, "That's cannabis." And I said, "I don't want any cannabis." And so then she proceeded to tell me I had an endocannabinoid system and that this was going to calm down the surgical swelling and inflammation and pain and soreness. And I said, "Okay, sign me up." And that was January of 2015. And I haven't looked back. I've been in cannabis the last 5 years.
So you've clearly seen so much with that much experience. I mean, you've seen the days when candy stripers were a thing all the way to the days when candy stripers weren't a thing. And let's kind of pull back just a little bit and talk about the healthcare system in general. When people get access to healthcare, on the whole, what is the quality of the healthcare that Americans do receive?
Well, that's a great question, Jesse. I wish I could call it a well-run quality healthcare system in America, but honestly, we have a sick care system. We're spending $3.5 trillion in healthcare in this country as far as costs and expenses, and we're 42nd in outcomes. Our quality of life indexes are not good, and chronic disease, is really running rampant, and the healthcare system doesn't have any answers for chronic conditions. And a pill for every ill leads to polypharmacy. It leads to excessive costs. People have 5-minute visits. 76% of them end with a script at the end of that. People go home. They may take it. They may not take it. But it doesn't improve the health and well-being. It's just a Band-Aid to treat symptoms. And until we're going to spend time where providers can actually sit down with patients and talk to them about how they're eating, how they're moving, how they're connecting with others and speaking up and setting boundaries, food is medicine. But people don't understand that because we don't have time to really spend with people. Basically, I believe that, the chronic illness, which does not respond to traditional medicine, is the reason why I'm so excited about the endocannabinoid system, and how when I found out about it, I said, you know what, this really can help to tame chronic illness. In fact, it's the only thing that does. When we think about the endocannabinoid system, it helps us eat, sleep, relax, forget, and protect. Those are our core physiological functions. And traditional medicine can address symptoms when things aren't working quite well, but it's not going to fix the root cause. And I found that I needed to do something with this industry because people were making beautiful medicines and selling medicines, but nobody was sitting down and interpreting how to utilize those medicines for patients, literally looking at their treatment plan. I could look at somebody's list of medications and tell you what's going on with them physically and emotionally and what they're treating. And a lot of times you can just look at those medicines and then say, okay, on the cannabis side, what makes sense and how do we begin this to give them that better health and empowerment? And you talk about economics. Sometimes cannabis is less expensive than traditional pharmaceuticals, and sometimes it's more. But everybody has to sit down and have their own treatment plan explained to them. And that's what I decided was my unique role, to be able to interpret this and guide patients through the system. Because it's not a perfect system, right? The dispensary system, the medical marijuana system, whatever state you're in, and whether it's one of the 11 adult use recreationals or the 33 medical, there needs to be medical at the table, healthcare providers at the table.
Just to set the scope, what percentage generally of patients are dealing with a chronic illness or chronic condition?
1 out of 2 American adults have a chronic condition. 1 out of 4 have a chronic pain condition. So we're talking about a very high prevalence. So even if you think about anxiety or insomnia, 50 million people can't sleep and are about the same number that have chronic anxiety. With COVID, I'm sure that's even higher. But the prevalence of these chronic conditions that traditional medicine is not addressing very well. If we could really prove the point that cannabis medicine can work for these conditions, and obviously we need cannabis to be descheduled, but we could change the health of millions and millions of Americans by normalizing this option from a medical standpoint.
And so for somebody who is not a chiropractor or not a doctor, and maybe doesn't have the background, what exactly is the endocannabinoid system, and what can CBD or cannabis potentially help regulate?
Mm-hmm. Well, if we go back to eat, sleep, relax, forget, protect, that was a phrase coined by Vincenzo Di Marzo, an Italian scientist. And, so eating, our metabolism, our endocrine system, how our GI is working, and that can affect IBS and Crohn's and appetite, people going through cancer treatments that have lost their appetite, sleep, how we rest and repair and have good restorative sleep at night, relax, our anxiety, our stress response, being able to help us downshift into the parasympathetic system where our body repairs itself rather than being in fight or flight all the time. Think about PTSD and trauma that people are living through, whether it's been some kind of an abuse or just things that people are not able to forget. The endocannabinoid system can help to snip things away that you need to be able to let go of and protect your basic immune system, your health and wellness. So keeping you well, keeping you not having colds and sickness, and if you do, having it be very short-lived. And that's the other thing. It's like when we think about, there's a word I teach people. It's called pleiotropic, and pleiotropic means that it has many effects on physiology simultaneously throughout the body. So when I'm counseling people and they come with migraines and inflammation and surgical issues and gut issues and sleep and anxiety issues, you give them cannabis medicine. It's the same medicine, but it's going to help that whole trajectory of illness and issues that they have. And one by one, you can start to remove pharmaceuticals, reducing doses, and finding people the empowering path of freedom from pharmaceuticals, blood pressure pills, depression, NSAIDs, Motrin, Aleve, that sort of thing. And of course, any kind of opiates. The opiate crisis in America, we've still got 130 people dying every day from opiate overdoses. And the traditional healthcare system doesn't do anything except remove the pharmaceutical. So, the other thing is that, pain patients will come to me and say, hey, Elisabeth, I used to be on 8 oxycodone a day, and now it's 4, and they said it's got to be 2, and then I've got to be off. And I don't have anything to replace that with. And they're panicked. But over time...
And that pain is not going anywhere.
No, the pain's not going anywhere. But Jesse, the problem is every opiate you take makes the pain signaling worse. There's something that the brain does. It's called opioid-induced hyperalgesia. And what that means is that every opiate continues to accentuate the signals that are basically on fire in the brain. So the only way to turn that around and to reverse it is to start to remove opiates. But if you do, you don't want the patient to go through withdrawals and have untreated pain. But cannabinoids can actually get in there and lower the pain signaling. THC will turn the volume button down. CBD, THCA will start to mitigate the inflammatory processes going on. And the cannabinoids will also treat any of the withdrawal symptoms. Some of the nausea, anxiety, spasms, headaches, insomnia, all of those can be modulated by cannabinoids. So the beauty of this botanical medicine is that if it's done right and it's explained to people, it can be utilized in traditional healthcare eventually. And that's what I'm trying to do with my cannabis health coaching, to get people to wake up and understand this truly needs to be an option on the treatment plan.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's just accepted that medications are going to come with side effects. What you're saying is actually, in some cases, cannabis or CBD starts improving other aspects of their life. So you come in because you're having headaches and suddenly you're getting much, much better sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Again, that goes back to the pleiotropic nature and also the subtle cumulative effect of cannabinoids. One of the things I have to explain to patients right out of the get-go is that this is not going to be an immediate quick fix. And it's not going to be, revolutionary. Like, if you do have acute pain and you take an opiate and all of a sudden, bam, you just feel great and the pain's gone. That's not necessarily how cannabinoids work. But what I have to explain to people is that over time, they will see a difference if they stay patient. That we need to find, what's going to help activate these receptors to bring them back into balance. But it's a cumulative play. But the beauty of this work is that, I have an initial package where I get people set up and get them counseled on their way. They know how to approach the system, how to start. They understand the routes. They understand the cannabinoids, how to get these into the body, the basics of dosing, how to titrate. But then I have follow-up calls at 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And then I'm like, okay, how easy is it to smile today? How productive are you? How much are you sleeping? Is the sleep quality better? Are you happy? And, almost without fail, they're telling me, you know what? I didn't even notice this, but I am smiling better and I have more energy. And guess what? I have one patient who a year ago was not able to get out of bed and was laying on the floor stretching her back all the time with chronic pain, and she was on opiates. Over a period of a year and a half, actually, she's free of all of the opiates. She's walking, she's eating better, she's dancing, and now she's in a real estate license program. So she's completely, at 65 years old, got her life back and got a second career on the way because she's got energy. And she was about to give up 2 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It may be an unfair question to ask you, but if we understand the concerns that come along with opiates, and we also have some data on the promise that cannabis could offer people, why do we even continue to consider opiates an option? Is it a fear of liability? Is it that there's not enough data? Is it a larger political issue? All of those things together? I mean, it feels like we're setting people up for failure.
Well, we are. But the problem is what are the alternatives? Truly, when you think about a clinician's toolbox on the traditional care pathways, what do they have to deal with? They have opiates, they have anti-inflammatories like Motrin, they have gabapentin and things that calm down nerve pain. Same thing with Lyrica that everybody with fibromyalgia are on. They have all of these drugs that are Band-Aids, that are developed for very short-term use of very specific things. But the problem is that we need something that is going to help treat the root cause. And they don't understand cannabinoids because it's a Schedule 1. If we were to transition to talk about cannabis and traditional medicine, there are clinicians that I would love to bring into my cannabis health ecosystem and say, join us. But they're like, it's still a Schedule 1. If I write cannabis or if I talk about it with patients, I fear I'm going to lose my DEA prescribing authority for a medical doctor, right? So, what I'm trying to do is say, okay, we need to have this descheduled so that these people are not fearful of losing their livelihood or their reputation by talking about cannabis. But more and more, the patients are insisting on it. And the thing is, the dispensary is not the place where people need to get medical care. For younger users of cannabis, people in their 20s and 30s and even 40s that have always had a little bit of a cannabis proclivity, people that smoke a little pot, they're the ones that are less, scared of the option of going into a dispensary and using that trial and error and trying to use a tincture or a topical, and those are the easy entryways. But trying to be able to figure out all of these different modes of administration and how to use small doses of each of them at a schedule that literally looks like traditional medicine. This is what I'm trying to teach people. And so the regular doctors are a ways off. But my cannabis health coaching program is set up to really onboard people that are holistic providers that have their own practice where they can immediately apply this to their practice, have a value differential for marketing. They're not just an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or a naturopath, but they're that plus a cannabis specialist, somebody that's able to have this conversation as part of that regular patient appointment. And so broadening the pool of people that are able to discuss this with patients, assuage their fears, show them the roadmap, and help them stay faithful to the path. Because then we can start to see a lot more freedom from pharmaceuticals and empowerment in patients. And then, maybe the political system will have lined up in a year or two, and we can broaden this even further to medical doctors and nurse practitioners and the sort of people that really need to have first-line exposure to this for patients.
Sure. So let's actually get into that. You've described your company or part of what your company offers as a business in a box. What exactly does that mean? And for somebody who's interested in getting into cannabis coaching, what exactly would that look like?
Okay. Yeah. So, when over the last 5 years, as I've been working with patients and designing this system, obviously first it was for myself. I needed assessment forms where I could really do a good intake of that patient. Then I needed things to teach them. Okay, what do they need to learn? Oh, here's the cannabinoids. Here's the different routes of administration. How to dose different kinds of products. And then here's a way to track that and to see if we're making favorable progress or if we're sliding backwards. And so I developed these tools over a period of years to use in my practice, and then it essentially wrote down the roadmap of how to do this and created a comprehensive education. So you have to start with that first. So if I look at the first thing that's in the toolkit or the business in the box, it's the 8-hour plus online education. It used to be where I was going to teach this live, but now with COVID, I had to put everything online because I was going to launch May 1st here in San Diego, doing a live event, and of course that had to be canceled. So I retooled, put it all online in a course platform, and recorded videos and lots of interactive assignments and quizzes to get people to understand the basics of cannabis, the history, how we used it as medicine for thousands of years, and then how we lost it with prohibition, introducing Meshulam and the research out of Israel and the science behind it, putting together endocannabinoids and cannabinoids, and understanding how phytocannabinoids can supplement for the endocannabinoids when our body falls deficient from the way we live and toxins and genes and stress and poor nutrition. And then taking that and applying all of those different components to different conditions. So what can benefit most? Neurological conditions that have a lot of immune and inflammation, gut issues, mental health issues, chronic pain. And so developing treatment plans for each one of these specific conditions that I've been using in patient care for years. So it's starting with the education and then giving people the short and long form assessments on how to talk with patients, and then the patient teaching from what you've gleaned in that interview. Then now you've got to turn it around and teach them how cannabis can help their specific condition, how it can help treat their specific illness, and then the pharmaceuticals that they're currently using, which one of those might be on track to reduce the dosage or even remove the pharmaceutical, and then how to track that, how to really gauge efficacy so that they are able to stay on track. So the tracking tools, and then a care plan. So if somebody is going through the patient appointment, then they're going to need to send patient notes. And so I've developed a care plan that the provider, the health coach, can just insert what their recommendations are for that patient, along with a lot of tips and tricks from functional medicine, because cannabinoids are facilitators towards greater health. But if you pair it with lifestyle medicine, where you're really addressing nutrition and connection with others, and speaking up and setting boundaries, and exercise and movement, how do we use cannabis so that somebody's going to be able to start moving again, to start walking, to start doing some floor stretching and yoga, and to say yes to activities, and to have the energy to go and do a healthy hike or a meetup? All of these things need to be laced together. So functional medicine is a big part of the care plan that I wrote. And then I also gave them a community 101 presentation. So just the bare basics, it's only 30 slides, but it helps them go out to the community centers where they live, or host a workshop at their office and teach people the basics of cannabis medicine. So literally starting from the education to all of the things they're going to need for a patient appointment, to going out and presenting themselves, and then finally marketing. So once we have a competent, trained cannabis health coach for holistic caring, then we're going to market them and put them in an online directory where somebody can come to holisticcaring.com and find a provider that's been trained by us in their area to go see them, or to do remote visits by phone. So,
and what does that relationship between patient and coach actually functionally look like? Is that in some cases many visits, a couple of visits? Is it an ongoing relationship?
So the way that I've been setting things up over the period of years is I have an initial visit with somebody as a consultant, right? So they would make an appointment with me online. I'd see them either in person or by phone, and then have 1, 2, 3 follow-ups with them, sometimes more. But the way that this needs to be going forward, when you think about the economics and the costs and that sort of thing, patients don't necessarily, and sick people aren't necessarily wealthy. So my idea is to train people who already have a thriving practice where they're already seeing patients to have this as part of their conversation. You don't have to have, if you're an acupuncturist who has 100 patients, you've already done intakes on them. You already know what's going on with them. If I teach you how to talk about cannabis as medicine and cannabinoids and CBD with your patients, now you get to just add that to your patient visit. And so you're going to be continuously seeing them once a month anyway, have this conversation with them. So really just adding something, it's a value add to the providers and to the patients. So, when I train these providers to be cannabis health coaches, it broadens their opportunity. And of course, it broadens the base of people that want to talk about this as medicine with the patients, right? Because if you think about, go back to the dispensary. We haven't talked about the dispensary. You go into the dispensary and literally you've got a 60-year-old person there that really could benefit from cannabinoids, but they don't know where to start. And so the 23-year-old budtender behind the counter gives them a bottle of high CBD oil and a topical. And that's a great start. But what happens when that person takes that bottle home, tries it for 2-3 days and said it doesn't work, and then they abort the option? The problem with that is you have to do that 5 to 10 milligrams twice a day. And cannabis is lipophilic. You want to put that in right before you have a meal so that it gets boosted into the bloodstream, because systemic access to the bloodstream is what this is all about. And then you need to do that consistently for at least a couple weeks, more like 30 days, before we're really going to say whether or not this works. That dispensary budtender is not going to be able to counsel that person on their way to understand this. And then the other thing is folding in THC. A lot of times they'll be like, okay, Gramps doesn't need to have any THC, but if somebody's got bone-on-bone degenerative arthritis, yes, they do. But the problem is how do they use that? Okay, maybe they're going to understand to take one of those Kiva mints at 2.5 milligrams and give that 3 times a day. But the people behind the counter at the dispensary are not being trained in how to utilize this as medicine. They're more trying to enhance the experience, like somebody going into an Apple store and say, hey, blow me away, right? Yeah. So it's a whole different conversation. And so what I'm trying to create is the outsourced provider-patient relationship in a coaching standpoint relationship, rather than really the traditional buttoned up medicine where you get 5 minutes with your doctor. No, this needs to be an ongoing thing where we can assuage people's fears, motivate them to try, motivate them to adjust and understand trial and error. But when they feel that they're supported by somebody that really understands this and understands them, the patient is going to be much more consistent. And for the industry, that means that we've got retention on the products. That means we're not just losing somebody because they tried that CBD for 3 days and it didn't work. No, we're going to modify that treatment plan so that we're going to make that patient a long-term customer with a treatment plan that's actually working for them. So it's a win-win for everybody. The patient wins, the providers and the health coaches win, and the dispensary wins, because now they're going to be able to keep clients coming into the doors and happy with, and then of course they're going to send all of their friends and say, hey, I'm seeing, my acupuncturist who's now a cannabis health coach, and they're really walking me through how to use this as medicine. And, I'm getting more out of the acupuncture because coincidentally, acupuncture upregulates that endocannabinoid system as well. So, it's really taking a broadened, holistic view of how to practice this as medicine and really create that cannabis health ecosystem from the cannabis health coaches, the patients who are now empowered and on track, and that dispensary system. where we can get, and my dream is to get multi-state operators to really want to buy in and partner with holistic caring so that we can take the education that we've created for the health coaches, as well as the dispensary education. I have complete education where I can consult and go in and train dispensary staff and industry insiders on the basics of cannabis medicine and how to have these conversations and stay safe with what you say so that you're not practicing medicine, but you're giving that patient the best service that they need from that dispensary level. But imagine, if there's a dispensary that's opening in Oklahoma, I could go in there and say, look, I can do dispensary training for your staff. I can train your local providers that are holistic health practitioners how to add cannabis medicine to their conversations, which creates sales for you outside. And then I have patient modules. So cannabis and cancer, cannabis and chronic pain, and how to wean down opiates, cannabis and neurological conditions like epilepsy and autism, cannabis and neurodegenerative like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and MS, cannabis and autoimmune conditions, arthritis, IBS, Crohn's, and then cannabis and mental health, how to use it for anxiety and depression and disordered thoughts, PTSD, etc. So I've got all of these programs ready to go, looking for the next way to plug and play this into this cannabis health ecosystem.
Elisabeth Mack is the CEO and founder of Holistic Caring. Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, Jesse. It's been an honor to chat with you today, and God bless you.
You can find more cannabis industry reporting at TRICHOMES.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you are a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can find the show at highground@TRICHOMES.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at TRICHOMES.com and following us on all social media. The High Ground is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Budtender. Thank you for listening.